Guys, let's move over to the Cotton Bowl. And this is Friday night, January the 10th. Number 5, Texas. Number 8, Ohio State. Guys, I don't know if you looked at the forecast for North Texas, but meteorologists are calling from anywhere from 5 inches to 13 inches of snow here in the Metroplex. It's giving Green Bay Packer vibes when they won the Super Bowl here in, was that 2011? Whenever that was. One thing that I can guarantee you, the roads will be an absolute mess. So if you're going to the Cotton Bowl, get there like 4 or 5 hours early because that's what it's going to take to be in attendance for that game. If Penn State and Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl will be known for their defense, at least on the surface, it feels like Texas and Ohio State may be known for their offense. But, Trey, as we talked about in the quarterfinal recap, defense winning a championship is going to be true no matter which one of these 4 teams comes out. In fact, I think if you're looking at which matchup might favor a team the best, Texas would actually like this to be more of a defensive struggle, given some of the, I think, issues maybe they've had closing games out on the offensive side of the ball. So we talked about it with the Orange Bowl. When you look at this game, what's the number one storyline that jumps out to you from Friday night?
I got to see if Texas offense can get it together to the point where they can keep up with what Ohio State's done. That's the biggest question I have. And until I have that answer, it's hard for me to not say I think Ohio State's going to win this one going away, because we've talked about it all season. It feels like that Texas offense is just stuck in second gear, can't find that extra level. And if that's true on Friday night, I think there's going to be a lot of finger pointing and a lot of questions asked of Steve Sarkisian, because that's his side of the ball and that's his baby. And I don't see Ohio State's offense slowing down anytime soon. Texas defense is fantastic. And if they can get pressure on Will Howard, it could be a completely different ball game. But Ohio State looks like a team that has found their groove, and it's going to take an extraordinary effort on both sides of the ball to keep them from moving on. Because, like you mentioned, everybody wants to talk about what Ohio State's offense has done. Their defense has been just as impressive, shutting down 2 really good offenses in Tennessee and Oregon. So if that Texas offense doesn't bring its A game, it's just a matter of time in my mind before the dam starts to break and that Ohio State offense with all those Maseratis starts to break through.
I think what was the key for Ohio State in dominating and shutting down Tennessee and Oregon, as you mentioned, it's taking away the run. It's making the other team one-dimensional through the air, and their pass rush has been getting home. They were absolutely devastating to Dylan Gabriel. They had Nico Iamaleava completely lost in his first road playoff game of his young career, right? And I think we showed those juxtapositions a little bit where you had an experienced quarterback in Dylan Gabriel. We wondered if he was going to be able to handle the situation a little bit better. Obviously wasn't. Ohio State was able to lock down those defenders. So, Garrett, as I throw it over to you, offensively for Texas, Ohio State's going to try and bring pressure with just 4 or 5. So my question for you, what does Texas have to do schematically to move the ball against Ohio State?
Well, they're going to have to do something different than what they've been doing, because it just hasn't been working. And specifically in the run game, when I look at the run game specifically, kind of went through some of the numbers just to make sure. Texas only ran the ball for 53 yards against Arizona State. Go flip that over and look at what Ohio State just did to Oregon. That was 23 yards for the Ducks in that game. So if you want to see something similar to the Rose Bowl, don't run the football, right? If Texas can't run the football, we're going to go see this whole thing explode just like it did. I think a lot of it's going to come down to just finding ways in the general just kind of flow of the game to just put together more sustained drives, right? Take what's being given to you. Don't try to go for the big thing. Don't overthink it. Run the football when you need to. If you got to move the pocket a little bit, if you got to put this on more of a stretch play, get this to the outside, like whatever you got to do, find ways to run the football, find ways to set up that play action, because that's where Texas has been successful offensively. When you put the whole thing on Quinn's shoulders, it doesn't look that good. He needs a balanced attack in that run to be able to succeed. And so for me, Texas has to find a way to run the football. I don't care how many people they're bringing, how many people they put in the box. You don't want to just try to get this thing into one-on-ones, because Ohio State will be I think, the best defense they've played all year, and I don't think it's particularly close in that regard. Ohio State might have the best defense in the country. And I think that when you really try to break this one down, it's setting up the run game so that you can hit stuff down the field. If they're going to try to just hope that they can get their receivers wide open in space and just outrun people like they've been doing, it ain't gonna happen, right? If you look at what they've been doing and how they scored early against Arizona State, it was hitting guys in space. It was, off to the races. That's not gonna happen against Ohio State. They have athletes to keep up with that in that back half. And so you're gonna have to find a way to run a much more balanced attack if you're Texas, because you just don't have the same talent advantage you've had over several teams this year.
Buckeyes have the 5th ranked rushing defense in the country. No doubt the running game is going to be important for Texas. Trey, we saw Chip Kelly basically pitch a perfect game against Oregon. The motion, the way that he schemed guys open, Jeremiah Smith first and foremost in that group, and the way that he protected Will Howard and gave him a pocket to comfortably throw down the field was nothing short of impressive. Apply that to Texas and Steve Sarkisian, because we have been talking about this offense playing with its food and not knowing how to put a game away. And Arizona State was the better team, quite frankly, in the second half of that Peach Bowl against the Longhorns. So what do you see that Steve Sarkisian needs to do more consistently? What weapons does he need to be utilizing to beat the Buckeyes on Friday night?
That's the age-old question, because it feels like he has the horses, right? It feels like he's just not pushing the right buttons, whether that's leaning on the quarterback too much to make throws, whether that's running the same. I saw a lot of Texas fans online complaining that the run concepts were just the same thing over and over again against Arizona State, and that eventually got snuffed out by the Sun Devils. He has a lot of talent to work with, and I don't know. I wish I could answer that question for you, because it seems like all the pieces are there. I don't think the solution is chucking it deep. I think it's working the intermediate game, like Garrett mentioned, working in the play action a bunch as well. But it's balancing enough, just relying on your athletes to go make a play versus getting in a very aggressive Ohio State defense looking in the wrong spot. He's got to find a way to find balance of those two things and scheme his players open, because a lot of the Texas offense is going east-west, is relying on your opponent to miss a tackle. And that can sometimes work consistently when you are out-talenting teams. But when you have a good tackling team, like I think Ohio State is, like Arizona State was, it can get you in trouble. It can get you behind the sticks where you're having to rely on deeper passes. So balancing the misdirection, balancing the sleight of hand situation with just relying on your playmakers to go make a play and not trying to get too cute, not doing something where if you need 3 points, you're calling 3 pass plays out of a 2-minute timeout. There's just too many of those head-scratching decisions this year that you've got to cut back on if you want to lead your team to a victory in this situation.
I think we've got to see Ryan Wingo come to the party here against Ohio State, right? I mean, the Buckeyes are going to roll 3-4 elite pass catchers out there if you throw G. Scott, the tight end, in there. Texas obviously has Matthew Golden. He was the difference for the Longhorns against Arizona State. You've got Gunnar Helm. You're going to need somebody else to step up. And I think Ryan Wingo is a perfect example of just that pure athleticism and speed. We've seen him be big for the Longhorns at moments this year, but hadn't really done a ton in the playoffs so far. 2 catches against Clemson, 3 catches against Arizona State, I believe, if I'm reading my notes right. So whether it's him, DeAndre Moore, but you're going to need somebody else to threaten the Buckeyes, and I think threaten them down the field, if nothing else, to create space, to make those safeties respect the deep ball, especially if you're not able to run it as efficiently as we've seen the Longhorns do, right? I mean, even into the Clemson game, they were rolling over folks. And it really felt like their bread and butter had become that running game with Wisner and with Jaden Blue. Arizona State took that away a little bit, right? And if they can't get back to that against Ohio State, that's when I think that the Buckeyes are going to pin their ears back and really come after Quinn Ewers. Now, credit to Quinn. He made some big throws when he absolutely had to. I mean, that adjustment that he made at the line of scrimmage on 4th and 13 to check into extra blockers and block the cover zero from the Sun Devils. That's what Quinn's going to have to do pretty regularly against this Buckeyes defense. We know Jim Knowles likes to bring blitzes. He likes to disguise his looks. This is going to be the biggest test for Quinn Ewers. So anything else that kind of pops to your mind as far as storylines before we get to predictions? I mean, I guess it's worth mentioning this is technically Quinn playing against his old team, although I don't really know that taking COM 101 and spending a semester there counts as a former team necessarily, but people have tried to make that something. Do you think that's a storyline at all?
They signed a paycheck or two for him. I mean, I think fondly of my first job at the movie theater in my hometown. It's great. Every time I drive past it, I say, hey, I worked there for a couple summers. So that's great. But for Texas, it's always it feel like a broken record. It's going to be turnovers and converting red zone opportunities into touchdowns. If Texas is able to do that, they have a chance to move on to the national championship game. If they play like they have in those spots when the game's on the line and when it's possible to have when everything's going right and you just need to not turn the ball over, don't turn the ball over. That's the biggest thing for Texas that I could give a piece of advice to, because it just seems like that's what's holding them back. Now, Ohio State is not as turnover happy as the Clemson and Arizona State defenses that they have been playing. So might be a little bit. They're definitely a great pass rushing team. They're one of the, if I don't know if they're still considered the top defense in the country stat wise, but they're top 5 defensively stat wise. So obviously not an easier defense to play against, but maybe a little bit less aggressive when it comes to turnovers. So maybe that can tilt things in Texas' favor just a bit, but don't turn the ball over and convert your red zone opportunities to 6 instead of 3. And you're looking at a way better chance for the Longhorns.
All right, Garrett, I'll give you the first word here. Texas, Ohio State, pick the winner.
Look, well, there's certainly a lot of reasons for people to say that I hate both of these teams. Most of those people would be right. No, I don't really have any specific animus, towards either of these teams. I know that I got a Michigan shirt hanging up in the background along with a little bit of A&M gear, but don't necessarily have any specific hate for these teams. But right now, I don't see how you can pick against Ohio State. Ohio State's looked like the best team in the country since they started their playoff run. Unless Texas brought with them a couple of, maize and blue uniforms to trot out there against Ohio State, I just don't see a way that they can honestly keep up with them. I think that Texas is going to have massive flashes, right? They're going to have these big moments. They're going to hit a couple of big plays, and they're going to have some big moments where they're going to score. This is probably going to start with a lot of fireworks, but I just think that watching what Ohio State just did to Oregon, and what they were able to do against Tennessee, watching how effective their offense has been, watching how good Will Howard has been as a quarterback these last couple of weeks. And I think nothing can portray that any better than the throw that he made to Ibuka, which was very well covered. I mean, extremely well covered. And he just put that thing on a rope, dropped that thing in there. And I just don't see a way that Texas has the ability to keep up with that. No matter whether or not you see good defensive moments for either team, big plays from either team, I just trust Ohio State to make those big plays. I think a handful more times than I trust Texas to do that. If Texas lapses in the secondary, we saw what happened, right? Everyone liked to highlight that big play. I think it was the second one to Jeremiah Smith last week where they just dropped the coverage. Safety didn't go with them. He's wide open. Ohio State can do that to you in a hurry. I trust Ohio State secondary more than I trust Texas secondary, and I'm going to pick Ohio State to win this one by a couple of scores. Give me something like 38-24 Ohio State.
My thought was 34-20 Ohio State. I think it's going to be a couple score victory. I'm right there with you, Garrett. I just trust Ohio State more right now. They've shown me way more in the playoff on both sides of the ball than Texas has. And I just don't trust, even if Texas has a lead in the second half, I just don't trust them to put a game away against an equal or more talented team than they are. So I'm going to take Ohio State to win this one 34-20.
I think this game for me, similar to the offensive coordinator battle that I'm watching in the Orange Bowl, I think this game boils down to how effective the secondary is for both teams. And you guys have kind of teed that up, right? Ohio State's the top ranked secondary in the country. They're giving up just barely over 152 yards through the air a game. That's it. Texas, though, is number 3 in the country. They're giving up just a shade over $166 through the air. So a negligible difference there, right? One thing that I am looking at is the turnover discrepancy in the secondaries. Ohio State's only forced 9 interceptions this year. Texas has forced 21. Now, we've talked about Will Howard and the growth that he's had, his efficiency when he's protected. This front 7 from Texas, especially the edge rushers, they've been terrors this season, right? And they made Sam Leavitt run for his absolute life in that quarterfinal matchup. If Ohio State's offensive line can hold up, then great. I think Ohio State absolutely runs away with this. But if Texas can force Howard to make some mistakes, if they can force him into happy feet, we've seen he's a completely different quarterback, right? The film just doesn't lie. So I think this game maybe, for me, tends to be a little bit closer. But all of that being said, I do trust Ohio State's offense more than I trust Texas's offense to get this done. So I'm going to go with the Buckeyes 35-21 over the Texas Longhorns.
Gracious him. How about that?